Good morning, colleagues. Thank you for joining us and a warm welcome back to the PERCO SA Ponder virtual presentation series. Today's session will begin with a 30-minute presentation, followed by a 10-minute question and answer session, and we will conclude with an exciting lucky draw for a R1,000 Take-A-Lot voucher. You are welcome to submit your questions in the chat box during the presentation, which our guest speaker will answer in the end during the Q&A session. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the PERCO SA website for those who are unable to attend live, as well as those who wish to revisit the discussion for further insights. We are excited to also announce that bookings for the 2025 PERCO SA conference and exhibition are now open for both delegates and exhibitors. This prestigious event will take place from the 1st to the 3rd of October 2025 at the Sandton Convention Center, bringing together industry leaders, experts, and key stakeholders for insightful discussions, networking, and collaboration. Don't miss this opportunity to connect and engage with professionals across various sectors. For more details and to secure your spot, please visit our conference website, www.percon.co.za. This morning, we are privileged to host a discussion on a highly relevant topic, cybersecurity in the age of AI, protecting data and privacy. As artificial intelligence continues to transform industries, cybersecurity has become more critical than ever. Today's session will explore how AI is both enhancing security measures and being exploited by cybercriminals. Our esteemed guest speaker will share valuable insight into what this means for you and your organization. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today, Willie Strydom, Chief Operating Officer and co-owner of Silicon Works Consulting Services. Willie is an accomplished information technology professional with a strong track record in corporate services and strategic IT solutions. He is highly motivated, innovative, and entrepreneurial, currently involved in 3 different startups. Willie, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Hi there, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. If you don't mind, I'm going to share my presentation with you guys. And then, oh no, go away. Okay, can everyone can see?
Yes, we can see, Willie.
Okay, cool. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. Today, I want to talk about artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. So what I want to do is give you a brief history and then go through how it's affecting us today. Now, since the dawn of the technology age, men and women have all fantasized, romanticized, and dreamt of artificial intelligence. In fact, the first novel that was written by artificial intelligence, or about artificial intelligence, was written in 1925. It was called Metropolis. And it was the first book that explored how artificial intelligence could interact with humans. Now, a lot of people argue and say that Frankenstein was actually the first book about artificial intelligence, which was written already back in 1818. But the true understanding of artificial intelligence started around the 1920s. So subsequently, there's been quite a few other books, but some notable ones is Do Droids, Dream of Electric Sheep, and then I, Robot, which is also one of the most popular and famous books that was written regarding artificial intelligence. It must be noted, though, that back in the day, artificial intelligence was but a dream, and there was no ways that humans could even conceptualize having artificial intelligence actually operational. What is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence, or as most people call it, AI, is a field of study that uses machines to simulate human intelligence. Now, when they say simulate human intelligence, um, they are talking about the logic and how the logic is implemented and executed. AI-enabled machines can learn, can reason, and perform tasks that would normally require human intelligence. What are the benefits of AI? AI can automate repetitive tasks. AI can improve decision-making processes. AI can enhance accuracy and speed of data analysis. And AI can reduce human errors. AI can also save time. And those things are pretty true. Generally, AI can help with a lot of things. So if you have something that requires repetitive tasks and maybe something that is very, very accurate, AI can help you there. You can teach it how to perform the task. And it's pretty, as long as it is within the parameters of what it has been taught, it can then perform those tasks and it'll learn from those tasks. And if you give it certain other things to do when something falls out of those parameters, it can learn how to deal with it. Examples of how AI is used today. Many of you might not realize it, but your everyday task, some of the tasks that you perform every day, is already making use of AI. For example, spam detection. A lot of the companies that provide spam detection, they use AI software to identify spam emails and stuff like that. Everyone knows about ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot, self-driving cars. And so self-driving cars are not a thing in South Africa yet. But overseas, it is quite a thing, and it is already being implemented there. Robot vacuum cleaners, you've all seen those. Security systems like alarm systems for buildings and stuff like that. Digital assistants, chatbots, which is the vein of my existence. Whenever you have a support query with a supplier and you cannot phone them, but you can only chat with them, and there's a chat bot that you're dealing with. That's frustrating, but that is definitely examples of AI today. And in social media websites, believe it or not, but a lot of social media websites uses AI. It uses AI to determine what things you like, what things you potentially could like, what things you don't like, and then it adjusts the algorithm to serve you content that it thinks you like. Now, if they would need thousands and thousands of humans to perform that task. Whereas with AI, they can perform thousands and thousands of calculations for thousands and thousands of users, within seconds. Whenever you open, for example, the biggest example of successful AI being used is TikTok, believe it or not. TikTok is one of the few platforms where when you look at certain videos long enough, if you it looks how long you look at a video. Sometimes if you look at it twice or three times at the same video, it also looks how many times you like certain videos, and then it determines what videos you like, and then you'll find that once you start going down um, a certain path, you'll see more and more of those videos, and that is TikTok's AI algorithm or AI engine that picks up what you like, and it then makes it an educated guess. I suppose is the best word to use. And then that's how that happens. And believe it or not, like I say, many people don't even realize it, but AI is already very, very integrated into our lives today. The next one. The first AI machine was a machine called Deep Blue. It was developed by IBM. And in 1997, it beat the human chess master, Garry Kasparov. Now, back in the day, it was quite a big thing, and that that um, that day cemented the growth of AI in the human development, because that was a day when people realized that AI is not as an impossible thing as it was thought to be before then. Once that happened, many companies, big companies, companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, have made massive investments and massive research into AI machines, software, and as well as algorithms. So that's just the interesting tidbit there. So with AI, there's a couple of, so I've dealt with how AI is already in our lives and how it's helping us, but there's also a couple of concerns with AI. One of the first things is ethical concerns, because while AI devices or machines can learn, there's certain things that it would never be able to understand. For example, bias and fairness. You need to understand that all of these AI systems need to learn from something. So you need to give it material in order to, it's basically exactly like with, say, children, or, with humans. Now, you send a child to school, you give them certain subject matter to learn, and they go through it through their school career. They learn those things, and then that's how they learn and know things eventually. And it works exactly the same with AI. And we learn through stuff that we see. We also learn through deducing. We'll see something, we'll analyze it, and then we'll deduce an outcome from that, or an explanation from it, and that is how we learn. For example, you'll see that the sky turns gray. Eventually, it rains, and then eventually, you'll deduce that every time the sun disappears and the sky turns gray, it's going to rain. So AI does exactly the same. So that brings problems, because some of the materials that is available is not really it's not really relevant anymore. I'm using an example. For example, back in the day, many, many years ago, it was considered that a woman's place was in the kitchen. And there's literature and there's stuff that's still on the internet today that perpetuate that stereotype. Now, we've all moved on from that, and we know that is no longer the case. But it is potentially possible that AI systems could pick up on these things and learn the wrong thing. And it'll be very, very difficult. So to, once it goes down that road, that's a very difficult thing. What happens, for example, if it sees the wrong thing? Let's say it sees, it learns about the Second World War, for example, right? And it sees the atrocities that occurred there. It could potentially deduce that there's too many humans on Earth, and then devise a plan to, for example, save the Earth. Now, this is obviously a very, very worst case scenario. I am not saying that we should run and shout to the end is here, but I'm just using an example. These are ethical concerns that do exist, and you'll see there's two camps in the science world regarding AI. There's those that are absolutely for it, and there are those that are against it. And those that are against it will often bring up these ethical concerns. Another concern is privacy. I'll give you an example just now of what that entails. But AI systems often require large amounts of data. And then what happens to that data? Let's say you have a document and you ask AI let's say you ask ChatGPT, and please, if you are going to use something, use Microsoft Copilot. I believe it's the best, and we are a Microsoft partner, so obviously. But if you're going to use Copilot and ask Copilot to say redraft a document for you, and it's got potentially sensitive information in it. Let's say the personal information of employers or customers or whatever. That information is going to be in the artificial intelligence machine or software. It'll be in that database, potentially forever. So now it becomes a problem, because what happens to our privacy? I mean, what stops an AI machine from sharing those details? Because maybe it doesn't understand the concept of privacy. Maybe it feels that, in certain situations, there is no such thing as privacy. The same with surveillance. I mean, we already use AI systems in certain surveillance systems where it would recognize employees' faces, right? So those systems are constantly monitoring the cameras and monitoring the environment. So now suddenly, we have artificial intelligence that is watching our every move. So those are some concerns that a lot of people have. Safety and security is another concern. You know, what if you what if they start using AI in, say, hospitals, or like they already do, which is very scary for me, but transportation. Suddenly you don't have a taxi driver, a human taxi driver anymore. You now have artificial intelligence who's driving you, excuse me, picking you up and dropping you off at your destination. Even worse, what if they are in hospitals? Or what if they start performing operations? A doctor might decide, I'm going to do whatever I can to save this patient's life. And the AI might determine it's no longer an effective use of our systems and resources to try and save this patient. So those are the things that are serious concerns. What about military? Imagine we have an AI system that is controlling rockets and even worse, nuclear devices. Um, and what if that AI decides that someone is a threat? What would it do to eliminate that threat? And then another big one which concerns a lot of people is job displacement. Automation powered by AI could lead to significant job losses in various industries. So, for example, a big example is the vehicle manufacturing industry. A lot of workers lost their jobs because robots started taking over. Now, robots aren't necessarily AI, but it is exactly the same concept. If AI starts doing stuff that, for example, taxi drivers, imagine we start having taxis that is driven by AI. Um, what are all those current taxi drivers going to do? They're suddenly going to sit without jobs. Uh, so those are also something that we should need to consider. Now, this brings us currently, how does AI negatively affect our security today? And here is where it gets very, very interesting. As much as AI helps us, AI also helps the bad guys. Sophisticated cyber attacks. Criminals are just as scientists and normal everyday people like you and me start using the AI engines and machines and software to help us. Cyber criminals are doing the exact same thing on their side. However, they're obviously using it to work against us and help them. AI can be used to develop malware that can adapt to certain things, avoid detection. It can generate very, very convincing phishing emails, and it can exploit vulnerabilities. And I'll give you some examples just now. But yeah, it's becoming a massive problem, and us in the IT industry, we're seeing it more and more and more. And it's becoming a concern because at some stage, the scales are going to tip. So some examples that I want to talk about. So we had a customer who found an AI tool that would sit in on Teams meetings, and it would transcribe the meeting and then record it. The problem that no one understood or knew at the time was that the software asked the user whether they give it permission to record their Teams meetings. But then there was a second question that no one quite read properly through. And it asked, do you give permission for us to record the organization's Teams meetings and transcribe them and save them and a whole bunch of other stuff? And one user said yes, gave permission. What happened then, we only found this out a few weeks later, was that every time someone had a meeting with that person on Teams would then, in the same organization, or that AI app would install itself on the next person's computer as well. And since it got the permission to record the organization's Teams meetings, it installed itself and it started doing its thing. And before they knew it, half the company had the software on their machines and they had no idea where it came from. But then what happened is they would have a Teams meeting with a supplier or a client. And the same thing would happen on the client side. And the client would get a pop up and say, listen, uh, this organization is using this tool to transcribe and record the meetings. And would you like us to do yours? And the user said yes. And they said, oh, so you give us permission to to record the organization. And so it started spreading. And by the time we found out about it, because we weren't informed that they were using it, it was like a virus almost. Now they weren't anything negative, but it just gives you an idea of how these things can escalate without us realizing the implications. Another thing that happened that was very, very interesting to me was there was this journalist who tested an AI engine. And it was just a test. And he wanted to, they use Google for their emails, for their business mails. And he wanted to create a script that would create these notes. And he would then be able to assign emails to certain notes, just to give it more structure, similar to how we would use folders and subfolders in Microsoft Outlook. And then he played around with the AI engine, trying to get this script done. However, it didn't quite work out how he expected. So he switched off his machine and he went to bed for the night. Next day, he went to the office, switched on his laptop. And when he opened his Google Mail, half of his emails were gone. And he couldn't understand what was going on. And then after they looked around a bit, they found out that some of these emails were moved into these notes and then what happened was that the AI engine understood his instructions as a request. Now, keep in mind, he didn't give them his Google email address login details, but it turns out later that the engine got his username and password from his computer, then logged in, created all these notes, then saw how he shared, how he filed his previous emails, and then deduced how he would like to have his things sorted, and then went ahead and did it. Now, at the time, there was a lot of people that said, "Wow, this is amazing," But at the end of the day, I mean, he did not give that. It was a test. He did not give it permission to do those things, and it was able to do those things. Which is very, very scary if you think about it. Then something else that's quite big in the US at the moment, in the United States, is scammers using AI to create apps, fake investment apps. And these are apps that look exactly like a proper investment app. It's got all of the feeds from shares and stuff. And what they then do is they get users to join these or to download these apps and to join them and then start putting money in. And then what they do is they would show all these positive transactions. And what happens when most users, the moment they start making money, they put in more money and they put in more money, and they caught users that put in millions of dollars because they thought, they were already up. They thought they were making $1 million already, so they thought, oh, another $1 million, I can make 2-3 million. Meantime, back at the ranch, those transactions weren't happening at all. Those money that they were putting went straight into the scammers' pockets. But the scammers used the apps to show all of these positive transactions. So that is also something that came out. And then lastly, I'm pretty sure everyone has heard of this, but deepfake videos on social media. I actually saw one. Yesterday. After the very famous now meeting between the president of the Ukraine and the president of America, Donald Trump, and someone created a deepfake video where the two were physically fighting, and if you looked at it, you could not tell that it was fake, but obviously it was. I did see the live broadcast and the live event. I know for a fact they didn't physically fight, but AI was able to generate this video. Someone put in the parameters, it created this video, and it looked scarily realistic. There's a lot of companies. In fact, I think Scarlett Johansson has taken someone to court for using her likeness in one of their AI generated chatbots. So those are things that are currently happening. What can we do to protect ourselves? This is a very, very tough one because we basically fighting super intelligent um, equipment. Um, Basic start antivirus packages is also a good way, a good place to start. Um, One of the things with antivirus, stick to trusted names. If you get an antivirus that's called, something you've never heard of, a weird name, do a bit of research. Make sure that it has been around. Make sure that it's not. Um, Alternatively, stick to the ones that you know. If you have an IT department, ask them. What do you guys recommend? If you have an IT department and you have an antivirus system, it's a good idea to once a year call them in and say, guys, do we still have the best antivirus package for our organization? Remember, everyone's needs are different. Unfortunately, when it comes to antivirus, free and cheap is almost never a good idea. So make sure you have antivirus, make sure you have a good antivirus. If you're not sure, ask your IT guy. And if you, like I said, it's always a good idea to regularly ask your IT guy if you are still using a good anti-spam tools. Most of you should already have this in place. Anti-spam tools, unfortunately, it's like having motor vehicle insurance. It's tough to pay until you need it, but it makes a huge difference. I can tell you, some of our customers, we catch, or our spam engines catch up to between 30 and 100 emails a day at some customers, which is pure spam, pure scam. So those things are definitely with every cent that you have to pay for it. Another thing we can do is we have to be vigilant. We have to pay attention. We see this a lot at customers. The CEO sends one of the employees an email and say, quickly pay this invoice for me. Here are the details below. But if you go pay attention, it looks like it's the CEO. It's got the CEO's email signature, everything. But if you look at the email address, for example, it'll say, for example, in this case, it'll say Joe Soap. But the email address isn't joesoap@organization.co.za or .com. It is, some weird address, like, for example, in this case, scamguy@google.com. If you are sent an attachment, if someone sends you an email and says, attach, here's our invoice, if you click on it and it's suddenly asking you to log in, something's not right. Why is it asking you to log in? It is very possible that it is a scam trying to get your email username and password. So we have to be very vigilant. We have to pay attention. Now, I know sometimes we're busy, but at the end of the day, just taking that extra few seconds can protect you. We had a customer who the CEO sent an email to one of the employees and said, I am hosting our biggest clients, and I desperately and urgently need you to go buy 5 um, Apple cards, or Apple store cards, or whatever, Apple gift cards, sorry. And it was exactly the same scenario. It had the CEO's email, the name, the CEO's email signature, but it wasn't the CEO's email address. That person went, bought 5 Apple gift cards, came back, gave the numbers to the CEO, and that money is gone. Those cards are gone. So these things happen, and we have to be very, very vigilant. Along with that, suspicious. Be suspicious. If the CEO offers you something that's too good to be true, it is because it's too good to be true. You have to be, most organizations, the CEO won't ask you directly to pay an invoice. There's a process that everyone needs to follow. Why is it not following the process? If you're suddenly getting offered a promotion and an increase, but you have to provide your banking details, why? They pay my salary every month, and this is not how we give promotions and stuff. So be suspicious. And the golden rule, if it's too good to be true, if someone contacts you and says, um, this is so and so, and these are the returns you could be getting, if those returns are exorbitantly high, um, be suspicious. Something's not right, because if there were things like easy money, we would most definitely all be rich. So those are the things that we can do. That is the end of my presentation as well. And I don't know how long I was, but if there's any questions, otherwise.
Thank you, Vili, for sharing your expertise and enhancing our understanding of cybersecurity in AI. Colleagues, we are now going to move on to the question and answer session. After that, we'll proceed with the lucky prize draw, where one of you will win a 1,000 Rand Takealot voucher. So, Vili, I'm just going to read some questions to you that are in the chat box. The first question is, good day, Vili. Any idea, or rather, please share your view on pictures or videos that we delete from our social media pages or our phones. Do they really get permanently deleted, or they somehow get stored where we don't know?
So unfortunately, the latter is true in most cases. Um, uh, it is deleted, but it is still kept in many, many places. There are tools on the internet like Time Machine, where you can go and look at websites. What did they look like, say, a year ago? People constantly update their websites, but you're able to go. There's companies and organizations and servers that will save snapshots of certain websites. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And you're able to go back in time and see what did those things look like. And unfortunately, the same happens with social media. You have the ability, most of the big companies, they give you the option to request all of your data, and they say they deleted, but unfortunately, there's no guarantee. And unfortunately, I have removed photos from my past, and then it has still somewhere come up, or someone sent me and said, "I can't believe this is you 20 years ago." And I was like, "Where did you get this photo? I deleted it from Facebook so long ago already." But there's just ways that you can still find these things.
Okay, thank you, Billy. The next question is, what are some common misconceptions about AI security that organizations or individuals often have?
I think the biggest, one is that a lot of organizations don't understand how far advanced it is already. So a lot of organizations, you'll go to them and you'll say AI is becoming a problem, and they'll be like, "No, we're still years away from computers taking over," as the joke goes. But what a lot of organizations don't understand is that we are already very, very far advanced down this road. The point of no return is gone. There's no turning back. It's already we're already there, and we need to start dealing with these risks as it is. I think that is probably the biggest thing that we see is organizations not understanding how effective and how far advanced it has become. I think a lot of organizations still think of hackers sitting somewhere in a dark dungeon, for some obscure underworld organization. But that's no longer the case. Hackers are now people sitting in there watching TV with their laptop on their lap and asking AI to generate a script that would, log into your Facebook account, for example. And that is unfortunately where we are at the moment. And I think a lot of people don't understand that yet.
Another question is, good morning, Vili. Please demonstrate the preliminary steps to do before adapting a AI model, example Copilot, more specific to data sensitivity.
So it gets very complicated. So again, the first thing, exactly like with antivirus, if you have never heard of a product, Um, do your research. Who's the company that developed it? What are their goals? What are their mission statements? What are they doing in terms of privacy? Something like Copilot, for example. Now, Copilot has its flaws. Make absolutely no mistake. But Copilot's been developed by Microsoft, like a company like Microsoft. Microsoft's been around. Microsoft understands certain security frameworks. Microsoft understands those things. So so again, do your due diligence. Make sure that you understand who the company is. Then what are you trying to achieve? Because a lot of the time, I see people trying to use AI, but for the wrong reasons. They are trying to achieve a certain thing, and their misunderstanding leads them to believe that if everyone installs the Chat GPT agent on their machines, we are going to improve this. Sit down, discuss it with your IT department. What is it that we are trying to achieve? Will AI help us achieve it? In many instances, I can tell you AI does help a lot of organizations. For example, organizations that has to edit, say, a lot of pictures or a lot of video content, for example, they already use AI to cut down on certain things. They can tell the AI, this is how long the video needs to be. Whenever someone says, cut that out of the video and things like that. And it's the same with other industries, bookings, lots of hotels already use AI. So what is it that you're trying to achieve? And then wherever you're going to use it, make sure it's like with anything. You're not just going to accept any person to come into your organization and start working on your stuff. You're going to pick whoever it is. You're going to pick them carefully. And you need to do the same with AI.
Okay. The next question is, what role do AI-powered cybersecurity tools play in detecting and preventing breaches, and how reliable are they?
So we already rely heavily on AI to catch breaches and scammers and scams and spammers and all of those things. Um, there's a lot of algorithms that the systems use, but it does basic things. It'll see where was this email sent from. It'll then say, for example, let's say, for example, you send me an email, right? And you're from Perco. The AI engine will then have a look and see from which server was this email sent. If it sees that it's not a Perco server, for example, let's say it sees that this email was sent from Google, that is already a red flag. It'll then put already one flag onto that email. Then there's certain other checks that it does. So it does a whole bunch of checks, but those are, for example, one of them. They are very effective, but as with anything else, in human existence since the dawn of time, you would find a way to cover a hole, and there's always someone who spends all his efforts to find a way around that specific issue. So, we might get today where a spam engine has blocked all of the spam. But then the whole of today, there's someone else who's been working at bypassing that thing, and they find something else, and then the spam gets through again, or the scam, or the hack, or whatever the case may be. Then we find out about it, then we adjust, and we say, okay, this is how we're going to block that. And so it goes. So it is never ever foolproof, unfortunately, because like I said, as much as there are people working to stop those things, there are people working to work around those countermeasures. And so it is an ongoing battle. Where we often have customers who will say to me, Willie, for 2 months I haven't received one spam email, and today Sunday I've received 5. Why is that? And it's purely because those people just found a way around the current AI checks and stuff. But lucky that AI learns, and so tomorrow those emails are blocked again. But unfortunately, people find ways around it every now and again.
Next question is, which jobs are most at risk with regards to AI?
It's a very difficult question. Um, my personal opinion is all jobs. Uh, there is very little jobs that AI could not accomplish. At the moment, I feel anything that's very physical, for example, say a plumber, for example, it's going to be a few years before you'll have a machine that could come and fix your plumbing, for example. Same with builders, electricians and stuff like that. Anything where there's physical labor involved, that's going to be very difficult for now for AI to replace. But anything that requires thinking and not so much physical work, like let's say, for example, transcribers, or for example, people who type minutes and type reports and stuff like that. You can already, a lot of systems, financial systems, monitoring systems, they already come with reporting systems that are quite amazing. So the problem is that eventually it would be able to replace almost anything. I gave you an example earlier of the vehicle manufacturing industry. Thousands of people lost their jobs when they started implementing robots that could weld and stuff. And as they improve the technology and as they figure out how to make certain things work, it is going to start encroaching on a lot of potential jobs. At the end of the day, there's another school of thought that says, well, someone needs to operate all those computers and all those AI engines and maintain them, which is fair. But I think I think there's a massive risk for quite a few jobs in the world today.
Another question is, we still have about 5 minutes to go. What's your take on running LLMs locally, like browser use and DeepSeek R1 locally?
I mean, you could do that, right? But a lot of people don't know how to do that. And also, 90% of all systems these days are online. So, but it's definitely something to look at. But you need to consider the infrastructure that you would need to run it. You need to consider security. You need to consider maintenance. So, for a lot of people, it's just not worth it. But at the end of the day, it's exactly like what do they call them? End of worlders. At the end of the day, if you're off the grid, living in your little corner there in the woods, it's the safest you're going to be, but not everyone can do that. Again, that's my personal opinion.
Another question is, what's your take on applications such as Truecaller on one's personal phone?
So we have a lot of customers who use Truecaller. A lot of our staff and colleagues use Truecaller. Again, in a lot of cases, Truecaller works. In a lot of cases, it gets abused and it doesn't work. And in some cases, there's mistakes. A lot of people prefer it, but we've had customers who one day call and say, Willie, whenever I call my customers now, it shows up as spam or it shows up as a debt collector, something like that. And then it's quite a mission for us to help those customers get off or fix whatever it is. But then also it helps a lot of people, someone who's very busy and who can't take, say, 5 robocalls a day. It helps those people a lot to sort of filter those calls. So I'm not a personal fan of it. I don't use it personally myself. But like I said, I know a lot of people use it. A lot of my colleagues use it. And I like I said, I think it's like with anything else. It's got its good points and it's also got its bad points.
Does one need a license for Copilot or is it free?
So there is a version of Copilot that's free, but if you want to use the more advanced functions, then you do need a license. If your organization uses Microsoft 365, then you have a lot of features of Copilot already available. But if you want to use extended features, like for example, if you want Copilot to join your team's meetings and transcribe the meetings and stuff like that, then you'll have to pay additional for it.
With technology usually getting better with time, quite quickly at that, is there any home of keeping up with the numerous ways AI can be used to manipulate and exploit businesses and individuals?
So again, I'm going to have to give you my personal opinion, right? The answer is no. The short answer is no. It is developing at such a rate. They announced last week the world's smallest microchip, which is unfathomably small. Which means supercomputers are getting smaller and easier to build. And those things, the bigger or the faster your supercomputer is, the better your AI is going to be. But then saying that, at the same time, you need to also realize, as much as there are people in the world who try to do bad, there is almost always more people or equivalent number of people who are trying to do good. So what I believe is going to happen in the next few years is we're going to see a massive growth in these tools and to help people. I think, it's not big and it's not big yet, but some of the new cars that come out in South Africa already, if you veer out of your lane, there is a system that would slowly bring you back in. Those systems exist. I think the new Cherries have them. There's a couple of cars that have them already. The Mercedes has them. So I think we're going to see more and more of those things in our everyday lives. That's going to help us. But unfortunately, at the same time, there's going to be someone who's going to think, what if I can take over that vehicle? And there's going to be someone who's going to spend hours and hours trying to figure it out. And then one day someone's going to figure it out, and then they're going to have to figure out a way to block it. But it'll be an endless cycle. It'll always be like that. And as much as I'm not for 1 second, I don't believe that the world will come to an end because of AI. If it's going to come to an end, it'll be because of Apple iPhones. But I don't think AI is going to just yet take over the world and it's all doom and gloom. I think AI is going to help us a lot. I think AI is going to be responsible for some of the next biggest breakthroughs, like, for example, maybe cancer cures or things like that. I think AI is going to help drastically with things like that. But unfortunately, we're going to have to be more vigilant as time goes by, because as it helps us, there's going to be people who is going to try and abuse it.
Okay, we still have a couple of questions. How can I verify if the email is from scammers? Is there any AI software or tool that can help me identify scam emails?
Okay, so there is definitely. If you use Microsoft 365, for example, they have already a built-in, very good built-in spam engine. Companies like Mimecast also has a very, very good spam engine. But at the end of the day, like I said, be vigilant. When an email comes from Joe Soap that it'll show the email address. It's very, very rare that it'll not come from Joe Soap, but it shows Joe's email address, because our servers don't allow just anyone to log in and send emails. You have to be verified. Obviously, if they get Joe's username and password, they can log in and they can send emails on his behalf. But generally, you'll see an email, it'll say Joe Soap from this company. But if you look at the back end of that name, there's always an email address that is displayed, and then often you'll see. It's happened here at Burko, where it appeared to be coming from the CEO, but if you looked at the email address, it was some random Gmail address. So just be vigilant. Have a look. Just take an extra moment just to read everything through carefully. And then, like I said, if something is out of the norm, or if something is strange, or if something's too good to be true, then it most likely is. If you've been eyeing that girl in accounts for 2 years and she's never said yes to you taking her out on a date, if she suddenly is asking for your phone number, something's not right. You need to be 100% sure that this email is actually from her. So that's what we can do. But most email services have very good spam protection. If you do subscribe to some email system, make sure that you also subscribe to their spam engines. It's a pain in the backside. I understand that. But those things learn. In Microsoft, if you get an email and goes to your junk mail, if you right click on it and you choose not junk, you're telling the spam engine, listen, you made a mistake. This is how I want you to deal with these emails in the future. And those things learn from that. I'll often tell users, just tell it, just teach it. After a while, you'll see less and less valid emails goes into your junk mail because you're teaching the spam engines how to sift through these things.
Morning, Vili. Do you think our cell phones listen to us? It's interesting how sometimes after having a conversation about something out loud and we open social media and suddenly see ads or posts related to what we were just talking about.
Again, I'm going to give you my personal opinion. Yes.
Mm.
A lot of the apps that you install, it has terms and conditions that are pages and pages long, and very few people read through those terms and conditions. In addition to that, a lot of apps, the moment you install it, it asks you for permission to the microphone, it asks you for permission to your contacts, it asks you for permission to your camera. And we give these apps permissions. We say, yes, you can most definitely use my camera or my microphone. And I myself, I recently was in the process of buying a new car, and every time I opened Facebook, there were car ads. It was absolutely crazy, but I am 100% convinced there are some apps, not all of them, but there are some apps that are most definitely listening and picking up on keywords and then
Mm.
implementing those keywords in algorithms to serve us content based on what we discuss. So that is an unfortunate truth. The problem is we all have cell phones. Our lives are on those cell phones.
Mm.
And they know everything. Your cell phone knows where you were yesterday at 8 o'clock. It does. It know you don't. You think your GPS was off, but there are many other ways for your cell phone to know exactly where you are. A lot of you will relate to this. But you'll go to a shop and then suddenly you'll have a message pop up on your phone and say, "Would you like to tell us about this place? Does it open at 8 a.m.?" And you're like, how does it know I was there? And unfortunately, all of this information, everything you do on your phone 24 hours a day, it's recorded by someone or something, sometimes multiple apps. This is also why it's very important to be very careful. I mean, some organizations don't allow their corporate email, to be set up on users' personal phones just because it is such a massive security risk.
How can organizations balance the benefits of AI-driven cybersecurity solutions with the risks of AI-powered cyber threats, such as deepfake attacks and automated hacking?
Again, plan it properly. If you have a project to achieve a certain goal, have a proper sit down with experts. This is the goal we're trying to achieve. What are the tools we need to achieve this goal? Unfortunately, today, one of the worst things that we have about the internet is the ability to research things for ourselves. And you'll hear often the jokes about someone who has a pain in his toe and he goes and he Googles what he has and suddenly he has brain tumors. It's a joke, but these things happen. Someone will go online and they'll say, I want to do this. And some way someone will say, oh, you need to install this app. And they just click on it and they install it. And they give out all their company's details, without a complete understanding of, is this a tool that will help me? And often they just need to get whoever they trust, their IT guy, get him in, sit down and say, Vili, we are trying to achieve this goal. We think this tool will help us. What do you think? And then, we can make an educated decision. Don't just rush into it. Unfortunately, as with anything, you can lock your house when you leave for the day. But there's no 100% guarantee that no one's going to break into it. Same with your car. You can lock your car when you go to the store, but there's no guarantee that they won't be able to steal it. You take the precautions that you can. You don't park all the way in the back corner where there's no one, where no one can see your car. You park where everyone else parks, for example. You lock your car before you leave. You feel the handle. You make sure the car is locked. You can only do what you can do, and then often proper planning and proper implementation is the only way to get around these things.
With the impersonation of someone's voice using AI, is there a way to stop that, as it is a clear violation of someone's property?
So there's gonna be massive changes in a lot of countries and a lot of organizations in terms of legislation. Our country, many countries will have to at some stage come sit down and say, exactly like you're saying, it is a massive violation. How are we going to deal with this? You're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do this. It's unfortunately the only way. At the moment, like I said, there was this case with Scarlett Johansson where her voice and her face was used in someone's AI generated bot, without her permission. Um, and she sued them. But at the end of the day, the only way we're going to get around these things is with legislation. And those things are going to be developed once it becomes such a massive problem that governments decide to research and understand the implications and then adjust laws. It's happened all throughout history. As things develop, we figure out, okay, we need legislation to deal with these things. And then we implement those legislation. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We change it. And eventually, 10 years, 15 years down the line, it'll be nothing strange to have these laws in everywhere, and we'll be like, oh, that's against the law. You can't do that. So that's unfortunately the only way.
Hi, Vili. What is your view on Gibberlink? I think I'm pronouncing it right. People have come strong against us not understanding Gibberlink, but others argue that we can decode the sound waves as just 1S and 0S. But I beg to differ. What is your view?
Anything that can be analyzed, can be you can write algorithms for it. If it can be analyzed, sound can be analyzed, light waves can be analyzed. All of those things can be analyzed. My personal opinion is that it's very new. AI, just like humans, need to learn. If I explain to you how to do a job, on the first day you start that job, you're not going to be very, very effective. You're not going to be very, very proficient. But as the days go by, you learn. You say, oh, you know what? Yesterday I did this. It took me a little bit longer, but today I did this, and this is now much faster. So you adjust. So from now on, this is how you do it. AI works exactly the same. So, it works. I've seen some good things on it. I don't Like I said, I think anything that is scientific like that, if it can be analyzed, I think we're very close to being able to use it. We'll have to see. If you're planning to use it, like I said, if you've done your due diligence and you feel that it's a good fit for you, then go with it. If something's going to happen, then you deal with it. But I don't think we should run and hide behind the rock because of what could be coming. I don't think that's the way to do it. Or as they say, hide your head in the sand.
We are over time, but there's about 5 questions left. Um, are we not mixing AGI and AI here when addressing how an agent automatically acts outside of defined parameters? Normal AI only acts within defined parameters, right? Right. It's not like Jarvis from Iron Man yet.
So, okay. So most of the systems that we use today, for example, Spam Engine, It only deals with certain things. It only deals within certain parameters. But there are companies that are experimenting with a much broader um, implementation of AI, and those implementations are the ones that people are very, very concerned about. Systems that could potentially become self-aware. There's a true story about a lab, bunch of students who were working on an AI engine, and they figured out that they made a fundamental mistake in one of their algorithms that they are using for this thing. So they worked on it, and eventually they figured out that if they changed it, the system would be so much better. So they planned to decommission their current system and then implement the changes and then start up this new system with the new algorithms and start using that. Once that original system found out about the changes in the new system that was going to be implemented, without someone knowing in the beginning, it started copying itself onto other areas. Now, you know, a lot of people will say it was self-aware and it was trying to maintain its existence. Um, so those are the systems. I agree with what you're saying. A lot of people don't understand it, and a lot of people might be a little bit skeptical over basic systems, like, for example, your GPS or your cell phone. But there are systems that have a much broader implementation, and those are the ones that a lot of people are scared of, because those are the ones that might potentially one day decide humans don't know what they're doing, so let's get rid of them. Worst case scenario. But yes, in a nutshell, you're absolutely correct. I mean, we shouldn't be worrying. We shouldn't be worrying about what emails are getting sent to junk mail by the AI engine, because that won't take over the world. But um, it still has its concerns. I mean, what is happening with your information? What is that AI engine doing with all of the emails that is sent to you that it's reading to make sure that it's not spam? But yeah, in a nutshell, you're 100% right. It's not that doom and gloom.
Yeah, I think this is a comment rather than a question. Many young users use their cell phones to research homework and assignments. This could lead to the wrong algorithms being built around such users. As you say, once the algorithm has a profile, it is difficult to change.
100% correct. And we see it even in some of our customers. We have customers who write reports using ChatGPT or Copilot. And the problem is that exactly those systems learn your habits, just like those systems learn your TikTok habits and your Facebook habits, and it knows what videos you like and what posts you like. The same thing is going to happen there. And also, you know, if someone writes a 30-page report using ChatGPT, is that person reading each and every page to make sure that the data in there is accurate and correct? And then once the data is incorrect, that report gets submitted. That is now the new norm. That is now the new reality. So definitely, I would agree 100% with that statement.
Okay. With AI-driven cybersecurity threats evolving rapidly, what small practical steps can businesses take to protect sensitive data without requiring enterprise-level resources? Are there any AI tools that can help SMMEs enhance their cybersecurity without significant technical expertise?
There's not many systems available yet. There are systems that are being implemented, but for example, antivirus systems already have a lot of AI integrated into their system. So that's why in my presentation I said first thing you need to look at is a good antivirus system. A trusted antivirus system, because like I said, someone like AVG Business already use AI in determining when a file is infected with a virus or not. Same with places like Symantec and a few others. So you can start there. There's definitely tools that you can use. Um, it depends on what your concerns are also. And then, like I said, always go with trusted. And unfortunately, you don't have to go with enterprise solutions. But at the end of the day, free and cheap is not always the best way to go.
We're down to the last three questions, I promise. Currently in South Africa, legislation and regulation is limited. Do we know where the leading countries are regarding this? And can we benchmark ourselves against their frameworks?
Yeah, at the moment, there's no real clear leader. I know the UK, Europe, the EU has introduced certain legislation, but it's not been properly tested. It's not been implemented in many countries. Um, but at the end of the day, the countries that develop these AI tools, those are the countries that's going to come up with a legislation first, and those are the we're, at the end of the day, we'll have to see what are the challenges that we face. We might not have, we might not have robots, chatbots that, copy our celebrities. For example, I'm using an example now, but we might not have that. So we wouldn't have legislation, regarding using someone's likeness. Or we might have a problem where you don't know anymore whether it's a celebrity or a fake on the internet, and then we would need that legislation. At the end of the day, each and every country has their own legislation for specific reasons, and when it comes to AI, we're going to have to do the exact same thing. We're going to have to see what is the problem that we are facing in South Africa. And generally, if there's one thing I've learned, often the challenges we face in Africa is significantly different than the challenges that people face in other parts of the world. So we'll have to come up with our own solutions on how we address those.
Which endpoint solution would you recommend to an organization that is effective while it is not costly?
It depends what solution you're looking for. If you're looking for an antivirus, something like AVG Business is a good product. Microsoft 365 to host your emails and your data in the cloud. That is also a good product. We've moved a lot of customers over to Microsoft 365, and we have had a lot of a lot of near misses, where having that technology protecting our customers has definitely saved the day. There's so many. I mean, a lot of organizations use different systems. Um, you'll have to go sit down and plan what is it that we're trying to achieve, and then look at what tools can achieve those goals, and then work from there.
Okay, so the last question is, while AI can perform some self-maintenance tasks, human involvement is still necessary to ensure AI systems operate effectively, efficiently, and responsibly. Until which point will human interactions will not be necessary?
Um, so that is it's also something I also said in my presentation. A lot of people feel that while AI might take over a lot of jobs, they'll still be required they will require people who will look after them and maintain them and stuff like that. And I do believe that's the truth. I think for many, many years still, someone needs to plug in a server that hosts an AI software, an AI engine, and someone needs to make sure that there's electricity to power that device and that AI. So for the time being, I think that is most definitely the case. We will need people, but the day is going to come where, um, I think it'll be possible for an AI-driven entity to, for example, take over a factory and, build its own battery and build its own, what's his name? And then if there's the self-driving cars, it could potentially take over a self-driving car to deliver the equipment. So eventually, I think, as we figure out robotics more and things get smaller and easier to manufacture, and it gets better. I mean, 50 years ago, it was top of the range technology to put something on the moon, and today, you as a hobbyist can build something that's 10 times better than that. So the day will come. I don't think it's close, but the day will definitely come where it would be possible for AI-driven entities to maintain themselves, build themselves even, without human intervention.
Okay, so I'm just going to pick a winner for the Take Along voucher. It is, sorry. Elsie Mude, the Managing Director of Grotto Projects Pty Ltd. Congratulations, Elsie. You win yourself a 1,000 Rand Take Along voucher. So,
Nice.
colleagues, as we conclude this morning's webinar, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation for your participation and insightful questions. A special thank you to our guest speaker, Willie Strydom, for his valuable contributions. Before we sign off, please note that the webinar was recorded and will be available on the POCO SA website for those who couldn't join us live and those who wish to revisit Vili's presentations and the discussions. Also, bookings are now open for the 2025 POCO SA conference and exhibition in Sandton this year. So please visit www.percon.co.za for details, rates, and reservations. We look forward to hosting you later this year in Sandton. Thank you once again, colleagues, and until the next webinar, goodbye. Thank you, Billy.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everyone.